Okay, so this lesson is 4.7, special right triangles. Our essential question is still, how can you find a missing side or angle of a triangle? So the first part of the lesson, examples 1 and 2, are algebra skills, like I said, that you should already have. And we have to have these skills for what we're about to do. We're going to be working with radicals on triangles, and so you need to be able to simplify the radicals. So when you see a square root times a square root, you simply keep the square root, and then you multiply the two numbers together. So what is 7 times 2? 14. So this is the square root of 14. Okay, square root of 14, and that would be it right there. Okay, so number 2, our last example 1b, again, square root times the square root. This is the square root of, what's 2 times 2? 4. But what is the square root of 4? 2. So the square root of 4 actually becomes 2, which is the simplified version. Whenever you have the square root of a number times itself, it's just that number. So the square root of 10 times the square root of 10 will just be 10. The square root of 3 times the square root of 3 would just be 3. Because 2 times 2 is 4, but the square root of 4 is 2. Make sense? Okay. So then, that being said, I want you to write down what letter C is. What is the answer to letter C? The square root of 3 times the square root of 3. What'd you get, Ruby? The square root of 9. Well, what is the square root of 9? 3. So 3 is the final answer. So the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9. Well, the square root of 9 is 3. So again, if you have the square root of a number times itself, the answer is just that number.
Then why isn't it square root of 6?
Because 3 times 3 is 9.
Yeah, but for letter A, it's 14.
7 times 2 is 14.
Oh, I thought that was a 7. Yeah, I thought that was a 7 number.
Okay, good question. So example number 2 says simplify the following radical expressions. Now, what we have here is 5 square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2. You cannot have a, go ahead.
Can't you like multiply 5 times 2? Or is it 2 times 2?
It would be the square root of 2. You cannot have a radical in the denominator. Your final answer cannot have a radical, that square root symbol, in the denominator. So you have to get rid of it. Well, this one is really easy because we have the square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2. For example, if I had 3a divided by a, what happens here?
Oh, it's going to be like, I think it's
Just be 3. A divided by a gets rid of it, so just be 3.
so
The same thing is here too. 5 square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2. Square root of 2's cancel out, so the answer is just 5. Okay? Now, letter B, we have 8 divided by the square root of 2. And you might say, well, Mrs. Locke, 8 divided by 2 is 4, so the answer is 4. That's not the case. This is not, the square root of 2 is not the number 2. Take your calculators, hit 2, and press the square root button.
Oh my.
1.412.
So dividing by 2 is not the same thing as dividing by the square root of 2, because the square root of 2 is an actual number. It's 1.4 something, or whatever you guys thought that it was. Okay? So you just can't say 8 divided by the square root of 2 is 4. What you have to do is you have to get rid of that radical. So you have to multiply it by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. Now, the square root of 2 over the square root of 2 is the same thing as the number 1. Anything over itself is the number 1. 1 million divided by 1 million is 1. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So this doesn't look like the number 1, but the square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2 is the number 1. So now I'm going to actually work through this problem. The numerator, 8 times the square root of 2, I cannot combine anything because 8 is outside of the radical and 2 is under the radical. So you can't put those together. It would not be the square root of 16. 8 stays outside the radical, the square root of 2 is under the radical. Now the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, I can combine those. They're both under the radical. What is the square root of 2 times the square root of 2?
2.
It's the number 2. It's technically the square root of 4, which the square root of 4 is the number 2. So if you need to write the square root of 4 and then rewrite it as the number 2, you can. Or you can just remember that the square root of any number times itself is that number. So now we got rid of the radical in the denominator. But now we can simplify. Look at the numbers outside of the radical. What number can go into 2 and 8?
4.
4 can't go into 2.
Oh, 2.
2. How many times can 2 go into 8?
4.
4. So 4 square root of 2. Now I'm not going to divide the square root of 2 by 2. I can't simplify. I cannot simplify the square root of 2 because it's under the radical. It's going to stay like that. Right? And how many times can 2 go into 2?
1.
1 time. Well, we don't even have to write that. The final answer would just be 4 square root of 2. And that's your final answer. Okay? 4 square root of 2, and that's your final answer. 4.7. Okay. So, when you're taking the ESU, you're taking the PERT, you're likely going to see your answers. I should say likely. You will see your answers simplified. They will look all the way down to the simplest answer. They are not going to probably need to be simplified. They will be simplified. Okay, so we have to get comfortable with simplifying radicals. And here's why. We are going to be talking about 2 special types of right triangles. We've been working with right triangles for a couple of days. SOHCAHTOA, sine, cosine, tangent, that's all about right triangles. We really don't use that unless we're dealing with right triangles. But we're going to talk today about 2 special types of right triangles. One of them is the 45, 45, 90 right triangle. Obviously, one of the angles is 90 degrees. Well, if the other 2 are both 45, makes it a special right triangle. In a 45, 45, 90 triangle, the hypotenuse is the square root of 2 times longer than each leg. Those 2 legs are the same. As you can see, they're both labeled x, x. So whatever this side is, this side is. And it's because they have equal angles. Since they have equal angles, they also have equal sides. So in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, that's an isosceles triangle, 2 equal sides because there's 2 equal angles. Okay? So the hypotenuse is the leg times the square root of 2. Or you might see it as x, leg, square root of 2. So if I know the leg, one of the legs of the right triangle, I just multiply it by the square root of 2, and I have the hypotenuse. Well, if I have the hypotenuse, I can then find the leg. I would take the hypotenuse, and if you want to write just HYP, and you would divide it by the square root of 2. So also known just as x. So if you have the leg, you multiply it by the square root of 2 to find the hypotenuse. Or if you have the hypotenuse, you divide it by the square root of 2 to find the leg. Okay, so we're going to want to refer up to that information on the next 2 problems. Example 3, find the length of the hypotenuse. So A and B, we are given the legs. We need to find the hypotenuse. Yes? Say it again? Okay. So they gave us a leg. I know it's the leg because this right here is the right, this is the right angle, so that means this is the hypotenuse, which means this is the leg, and this is the leg. Look back up at your notes.
Are they the same leg?
They would be the same, because if this is 45 degrees, that means this angle has to be 45 degrees also. And so their legs would be exactly the same. One is 45, the other one has to be 45. That's all that's left over. So look back up at your notes a little bit. The hypotenuse is the leg times what?
Square root of 2.
The leg times the square root of 2. So how long is the leg on example 3a?
6.
6. So 6 times the square root of 2. Well, can I combine 6 and the square root of 2? Can I put them both under the radical?
No.
No. So the answer is simply 6 square root of 2. That's the length of the hypotenuse, 6 square root of 2. I took the leg, and I multiplied it by the square root of 2. Now, letter B. Again, we already know to find the hypotenuse because it said to find the hypotenuse. But I can tell that this is the hypotenuse. Why? How do I know it's the hypotenuse? What did I say last time? Chris? It's across from the right angle. So that's the side I'm looking for. So what do I do to find the hypotenuse?
Times hypotenuse. No, find hypotenuse?
To find the hypotenuse.
Leg times square root.
Leg times square root of 2. So we have 4 square root of 2. And we're going to multiply it by the square root of 2. So it would be 4 times the square root of 4. You're correct, because 4 stays on the outside of the radical. Square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4. Well, what is the square root of 4?
2.
2. So the square root of 4 is actually 2, so it becomes 4 times 2.
8.
Well, what is 4 times 2?
8.
8. So the final answer is 8. The square root of a number times itself is just that number. So if you want to skip from this step to this step, you can. The square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the number 2. So 4 times 2 is 8. So we multiplied all the legs by the square root of 2 to find the hypotenuse. Some people have a hard time remembering what you multiply it by. I think about it this way. The 45, 45, 90 has 2 equal sides, so I use the square root of 2. Okay? 45, 45, 90 has 2 equal sides, so we're going to use the square root of 2. We're either going to multiply by it to find the hypotenuse, or we're dividing by it to find the leg. When you multiply by a number, is your answer going to be bigger or smaller than what you started? Bigger. What's bigger, the hypotenuse or the legs? The hypotenuse is bigger. So we multiply to find the hypotenuse. When I divide, am I going to get a smaller number or a bigger number? Smaller. And the legs are smaller, so we divide to find the smaller sides. Okay? So now let's look at example 4a. It says find the length of the legs in each triangle. It already told me I'm finding a leg. However, I can tell that is the hypotenuse because it is across from the right angle. So look at your notes. What do you do to find the leg? No, what do you do to find the leg? Hypotenuse divided by what? Hypotenuse divided by the square root of 2. What is the length of the hypotenuse in example 4a?
4 square root of 2.
Check again. 9 square root of 2. So 9 square root of 2, you're going to divide it by the square root of 2. What can I do here? Cancel out the square root of 2's, so the answer is simply 9. Perfect. Okay. Letter B. What is the length of the hypotenuse? 15. What am I going to do to find the length of the leg? Divided by the square root of 2. Can I have a radical in the denominator? No, I cannot. So what am I going to multiply this fraction by? The square root of 2 over the square root of 2, because that's the same thing as the number 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. So I literally just multiply this by 1, but it's a different form of 1. Instead of multiplying it by a $1 bill, I multiply it by 100 pennies or whatever. It's still 1. So we have 15 times the square root of 2. Nothing can happen there. The 15 stays outside of the radical. The 2 stays under the radical. What is the square root of 2 times the square root of 2? 2. The square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the number 2.
But we need.
Okay, Theo, the square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2 is the number 1. The square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4. Okay? And then this becomes 15 square root of 2. What is the square root of 4?
2.
2. Now I have 15 outside of the radical, and I have the number 2 outside of the radical. Can I reduce that?
No.
No, I cannot. And yes, I have a 2 under the radical, but it cannot be simplified with the 2 that's outside of the radical. So this is your final answer. You can have a fraction as an answer, you just can't have a radical in the denominator. Okay? Make sense? Feeling okay here? Okay, so this was the 45, 45, 90. We're using the square root of 2 with 45, 45, 90 triangles. The other special type of right triangle is the 30, 60, 90 triangle. 30, 60, 90. It has 3 different angles, so 3 different side lengths. 30 angle, the 60 angle, the 90 angle, so it has 3 different side lengths. In a 30, 60, 90 triangle, the hypotenuse is twice as long as the shorter leg, and the longer leg is the square root of 3 times as long as the shorter leg. Notice both times it mentions the shorter leg, shorter leg, shorter leg. So we need the shorter leg to solve this problem, to solve these problems. Now, we have a 90-degree angle. Let me do a highlighter again. We have a 90-degree angle. So this is the hypotenuse. We have a 60-degree angle. This is the longer leg. How are you doing that? I do not want it to right. I'll have to go back and relabel that. And then we have the 30-degree angle, which means this is the shorter leg. It's the side across from the smaller angle. Smaller angle, smaller leg. Bigger angle, bigger leg. Make sense? Okay? So if you want to, actually I would like you to, go ahead and label. We have the hypotenuse. We have the SL. You want to write SL for shorter leg, for short leg. And then we have LL for long leg, or longer leg. Okay? 3 different side lengths, so I use the square root of 3. Okay, square root of 2 was for 45, 45, 90. Square root of 3, 30, 60, 90. So the hypotenuse is short leg times what? To find the hypotenuse, we do short leg times 2. Also known as 2x. To find the long leg, we also need the short leg, and we multiply it by the square root of 3, also known as x times the square root of 3. The short leg is where it all started. The short leg, now if I need the hypotenuse, I can take the short leg and multiply it by 2. So if I need the short leg, I can take the hypotenuse and divide it by 2. Or I could take the long leg and divide it by the square root of 3. I would work backwards. I would do the opposite. If I have the short leg, I multiply it by 2 to find the hypotenuse. So if I have the hypotenuse, I can divide it by 2 to find the short leg. Just do the opposite. We're dividing instead. If I have the short leg, I can multiply it by the square root of 3 to find the long leg. Or if I need the short leg, I take the long leg and divide it by the square root of 3. And the short leg is often just referred to as x. It's that building block. So I need x to find the long leg, x square root of 3. And I need x to find the hypotenuse, 2x. What number is bigger? The square root of 3 or 2? 2 is bigger. On your calculator, take 3 and the square root of it. 1.732, right? Something along those lines? Okay, so you might say, well, Mrs. Locke, we're multiplying by 3 here. 3 is bigger than 2. No, you're not multiplying by 3. You're multiplying by the square root of 3, which is smaller than 2. The hypotenuse is always the biggest piece. So let's do some examples together. And I want to refer back up to those notes. We're going to find x. So we're going to label this triangle. This side is what part of the triangle? Short leg, long leg, or hypotenuse? Hypotenuse. It should be the easiest one. Okay. Then 60 degrees is this angle. So it means this side is my long leg. It's the side across from 60 degrees. This is my 30-degree angle, so this is my short leg. So what side are we finding? We're finding the long leg. We have an X where long leg is. So look up at your notes. How do we find long leg? What do we need in order to find the long leg?
Short leg.
the short leg. And what are we going to do to that short leg?
Times by square root of 3.
Multiply by the square root of 3. So what is the short leg in this triangle?
2 to the square root of 3.
2 square root of 3. And I'm going to multiply it by the square root of 3. So what is the square root of 3 times the square root of 3?
9.
Not 9.
Oh, 3.
It's the square root of 9 or the number 3. Right. Okay, so you don't have to say 9. It's not 9. It's the square root of 9, which is the number 3. If you need to write the square root of 9, and then you say, you know what, I know the square root of 9 is 3, you could say 2 times 3. What is 2 times 3? 6. So your final answer, x equals 6. Are there any questions about how we're getting to that? Specifically the simplifying aspect or anything like that? We're good? Sabrina, we're good? Okay, if I'm going too fast, you need to repeat anything, let me know. Daniel, we awake? Guiden, we awake? Okay. Let's look down at examples 6a and b. We're going to find x and y. What I want you to do first is I want you to label this letter A, label the 3 sides. Hypotenuse, long leg, short leg. We're going to label the 3 sides. Okay. Which side is the hypotenuse? Hold on, I'm going to write this down. Hypotenuse, long leg, short leg. Okay, let's do it again. Which side is the hypotenuse?
Y.
Y. So it should be right here. Which side is the long leg?
4.
4 square root of 3, and so that means this is the short leg, right? Again, we know that because the hypotenuse is across a 90-degree angle, the long leg is across a 60-degree angle, the short leg is across a 30-degree angle. So they want us to find x and y. Okay. So y is the hypotenuse. Look up at your notes. What do we have to know in order to find the hypotenuse? The short leg. Do we know the short leg? No. So we're going to have to find the short leg first. So look at the short leg. There's 2 ways you can find the short leg. Either using the hypotenuse, which we don't have, or using the long leg, which we do have. So if I want to find the short leg, which is x, what do I need? What am I going to do?
4 square root of 3 divided by the square root of 3.
I'm going to take the long leg, which is 4 square root of 3, and I'm going to divide it by the square root of 3. You're absolutely correct. So I take the long leg, I divide it by the square root of 3. So it's just 4. The square root of 3 divided by the square root of 3 cancels out, so x equals 4. Excellent. So that short leg is 4. Now we need to find the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is y. Look at your notes. What do I need in order to find the hypotenuse? The short leg. So our short leg is 4. What do I do to the short leg to find the hypotenuse? Multiply by 2. What is 4 times 2? 8. And there's your answer. X equals 4. Y equals 8. Not hard stuff to do. You just have to remember those concepts. What leg is bigger than what leg, and how you find them. The square root of 3 is important, and the number 2 is important. On letter B, go ahead and label the 3 sides of the triangle. Hypotenuse, long leg, short leg. Okay, what side is the hypotenuse? 16, excellent. What side is the long leg? X is the long leg. Because if this angle is 30 degrees, that means this is the short leg. Okay? So X is the long leg and Y is the short leg. So which one are we going to be able to find first, the long leg or the short leg? The short leg, because what do we have to have in order to find the long leg? We have to find the short leg to find the long leg. You're absolutely correct. We have to know the short leg to find the long leg or the hypotenuse. So they gave us the hypotenuse, which is 16. So what am I going to do? So Y is the short leg. What am I going to do with the hypotenuse to find that short leg? Divide it by 2. The hypotenuse is 16. We're going to divide it by 2 to find the short leg. What is 16 divided by 2? 8. So the short leg, also known as variable y, is 8. 8 times 2 is 16, which makes sense. The hypotenuse is 16. Now, to find the long leg, I'm going to use the short leg. Go ahead, Wyatt.
I thought that it would be the 16 divided by the square root of 2.
No, we're on the 30, 60, 90 triangle. Not a 45. Let's see, what are we looking at, bud?
Look at it.
This would be hypotenuse divided by 2. Just like it's short leg times 2, it's hypotenuse divided by 2. We only use the square root of 2 in a 45, 45, 90. Good question. Okay? So now we're going to find the long leg. What are we going to do with the short leg? We need to know that short leg, which is 8. What are we going to do with that short leg to find the long leg?
Times square root of 3.
Multiply it by the square root of 3. So it is simply 8 square root of 3. We can't combine anything because one's outside of the 8's outside of the radical, the square root of 3 is inside of the radical. Okay? I want to just remind you of 45, 45, 90. Basically, you have to remember the square root of 2. You have two sides are the same. The hypotenuse is bigger, so you take whatever that side is and you multiply it by the square root of 2. Or if you have the hypotenuse, you divide it by the square root of 2 to find the short legs. So that's all you have to remember for 45, 45, 90, the square root of 2. 30, 60, 90 is the one that's a little bit more complicated. There are 3 pieces. There's a short leg, a long leg, and a hypotenuse. So you need to know the short leg to find the hypotenuse of the long leg. We use the number 2, and we use the square root of 3. Okay? And go ahead and keep out your notes or any questions. We're good. Okay. Go ahead and keep out your notes because we're going to do a review worksheet on this, and you can refer back to it.